Good evening. It's my pleasure to call to order this June 17th, 2024 Policy Committee meeting of the School District of Haverford Township. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we have several policies that were on tonight's agenda. A section of them pertained to business and finance matters. There is one in the 800 section, and we'll begin with 815.
Sure. And I've been asked to kind of just give a broad overview regarding the updates to 815. So this is the district's acceptable use policy. There's been some kind of large-scale reorganization just to align with the district's current formatting as we've been working through the policies over the last year and a half or two. There's some minor editorial revisions with regard to the definitions. We did add a definition for artificial intelligence generated content. I believe also authorized users, because that comes up frequently within the policy in the AR. And then the major addition through collaboration with the administrative team is the creation of the 815 AR1, which pertains specifically to the use or best practices for use of AI technology within the classroom by both students and staff members. And correlating to that were updates to the acknowledgement forms that have already been part of the policy. They were just updated to include the AR, which pertains to AI.
The AI language, sorry, where did that come from? Was that purely created by this collaboration, or?
Yes, through the collaboration
Okay.
with Jen and Robert here tonight to talk about it.
Our intention with shifting this language and having the AR and the associated sign-off forms have this alteration is really to create some guardrails so that there is a way for us to explore what should the use of AI be, what do our students need to learn, how will our teachers need to be trained, how can they use AI, all of those things. We needed to have a set of guardrails because you can't figure that out without getting in there and using it. Mm-hmm. But we didn't want anyone doing that without having some sort of official, this is how you do use it and this is how you don't use it language that they can become aware of and then sign off on at the start of the year. And then Rob can share a little bit about what's in the AR and then what our intention is moving forward and how we will attack this issue sort of at a larger level as well. While I try and figure out which window is bothering Dr. Sheldon's vision here. Is it
the crack right there, so I'll just deal with it.
Sure.
So the AR generally is trying to address a lot of the major concerns people have around the use of artificial intelligence, uploading personal information, not attributing corrected copyright information back to the copyright holders, and things like that. And also, that the use of AI doesn't remove responsibility for whatever content you're producing or using. So just because you use generative AI to produce something and it turns out to be something you shouldn't have, it doesn't mean you're not responsible for that fact. It's still holding the staff member or the student responsible for whatever content they're using out of the generative AI platforms.
Can I ask a quick question on that, which might be more a question for legal, is given that we have a statement in the AR that says students and employees, are fully responsible for any potential offensive material, does it make sense for us then to also link to our policy around utilizing offensive material? So because at this point, when we have that in there, that they're fully responsible, there's no sense of like, what would that accountability be? And so I'm just curious if it makes sense to tag our existing policies on how we handle that for students and employees.
From my perspective, that's perfectly appropriate. And actually, Mr. Anderson and I discussed earlier today also adding a cross-reference to policy 830, because we also talk about confidential and personal information, but we didn't necessarily make it so specific that we are referencing policies that are already in existence in that regard either, so.
Okay, yeah, I think that that would just be helpful, again, around that sense of, okay, what's the accountability here?
And I think for me that, one of the questions I had in, I think this is AR1, there's things that are prohibited, recordings, information that would constitute personally identifiable, and some of it I'm like, well, aren't these also prohibited when it isn't from AI, right? So making that connection that this is like another layer for existing policies, protections, guardrails that we have in place, but that there's probably, besides the technology itself, the underlying values, practices are consistent regardless of the kind of format or means of doing the work.
Yeah, and we were, Ms. Saxton and I were just talking about like even with regards to copyright, it's the same thing. The policy talks about photocopies and things like that, but we're obviously applying it to AI here. Like I said, I think by and large, it was mostly trying to address a lot of things that people have concerns about with regards to AI and their usage in the classroom, whether it be by students or staff, just to kind of get the guardrails up and running for us. And then as Dr. Ms. Saxon was mentioning, the plan now is to use this along with a staff working group to kind of really delve into AI and how all of our staff, teachers, support staff, administrative staff can use it, and then move into, how they can be used with students and stuff, and then within lessons and how students might be able to use them independently. And then that'll probably at some point in time, we'll be looking at revisions here to kind of even more fine tune what our guidance is within the AR.
With that working group, Ms. Saxa, are there any plans to incorporate students to find out how they're already using AI? Because I have to assume that they're probably using it way better than I am.
We certainly could. I mean, especially at the high school level, you're right. There's
Right.
certainly, as of right now, they're not using it from a district device.
Right.
As it's currently blocked across the district, but certainly they are finding ways to continue to use them even though we're blocking it.
Yeah, I think a lot of kids have their own devices, right?
And so for me, I think that is one of the questions, being like unfamiliar with AI and what all it encompasses, what apps or platforms would be considered AI or not. And so reading in this AR1, it says AI may not be utilized to replace a student or employee's obligation to perform and or generate their own work product. And I'm like, okay, so then what would the AI be doing? I guess like could you maybe just back up to explain like what AI capabilities are currently, what are the things that it could do, and what is it doing that isn't generating or performing work?
Yep, so it's obviously AI is evolving every week. So what we're talking about now will be different in 6 weeks. But I think by and large, the intent behind that is that students shouldn't go in and say, give me a paper on Abraham Lincoln, copy, paste, and turn that in as their work. There's ways to use the AI platforms to maybe revise your work or ask for suggestions on how to reword things and things like that, but it's not, hey, give me a paper that talks about this topic. Not that that's probably more true for our students than I would think our staff would be using them to kind of replace work that they're asked to do, but we certainly have staff that are using generative AI platforms to generate at least the frameworks of emails and things like that, and then kind of making some fine tuning from there just before they send it out.
I had a comment on that. I mean, I think AI has a great potential to help the teachers prepare, prepare a lesson plan or something. I'm not really a teacher, but, I think it can summarize a lot of information very quickly and give an outline of, the material. And so, yeah, I'm worried that we may be restricting a little bit, the utility of it, with that particular bullet.
I think it comes down to right now, AI is really primitive because what we find, at least in the legal field, when people are using it, AI is getting it wrong and it looks completely right. And I mean, there have been attorneys disbarred from using AI and putting it in their fake cases in their own briefs and things like that because the AI spit it out. So I think it's good to start restrictive, but I like that this is step one, and then step two is going to be this working group, which I think you should include students, but you'll let me know. And then to come with us, and maybe we revise this in 6 months or 9 months after that group has sort of met and figured out good ways to incorporate it and enlarge the way that the whole community can.
Would that statement be interpreted to mean that they can't use AI? AI may not be utilized to replace a student's obligation to perform and generate their own work. They could still use it, couldn't they?
I mean, I understand that as being, they may use it, but then they are obligated and have accountability to make sure that, one, that information is correct.
Right.
And in a sense, need to reword it into their own words.
Right.
Like you would if you read a textbook and you're gonna reword and paraphrase and cite. This is that's the process that I would think that is what they're saying is potential. You still need to make it yours.
Right.
And you need to verify the truth of it.
Right, that's, yeah.
So we have a separate bullet that talks about that. So, I guess the second bullet down, or third bullet. Must be fact-checked and cited in accordance.
Maybe we could add a concept of what AI at this stage is permitted to do, like put that example where it says it can't replace performing and generating work, but may be allowed to edit, assist,
It's so
check,
squishy.
proofread, whatever we think is additive to the workplace, to the curricular goals, but maybe having a positive statement in there about what is permitted, because I also read it as, well, if it's not going to be performing and generating work, what would anyone use it for?
Maybe and I may have a different interpretation, and Justin, feel free to weigh in. I was reading that as the use of AI does not replace your obligation to do your job or to do your learning or your work. So it is not like, well, AI can do it, the work's done. I don't have to do it, AI can do it. I was sort of interpreting it that way. Justin, you looked like you were gonna say something.
Yes, so the intent behind it, and I think this is largely going to be dictated by what the specific assignment calls for or what the workplace directive is. So I think you could certainly give an example, but and I think Dr. McKay's example of, the assignment is to write the report. And it's not that the AI is going to write the report for you. Maybe it will aid in the research component of it, but that's going to probably have to be broken down within the assignment rubric. So the student or whomever is completing it is aware. So to the point about making an affirmative statement, we certainly could. It is going to be extremely factually specific depending on the scenario. And I can say that there were multiple rounds of collaboration on this with the intent of trying not to be overly restrictive. We did this did go through several iterations before it came to you tonight, so.
Okay. And how are we going to monitor whether, I mean, I guess you teach at the university level, Dr. McKay.
Honestly, it's still hard because even products like turnitin.com, like those products that we used to use for plagiarism, isn't keeping up with AI. It's doing its best, but it's not keeping up. So I actually don't know the best ways for us to flag it. Honestly, for me as a professor, I flag it oftentimes when a product comes in that's so different from the other ways that a student performs, and that's when I actually look into it further. So I don't know if as our IT person, I don't know, do you know, are there products that are being developed to be able to flag it?
So to your point, I know that there's, for kind of from a different perspective, because a lot of the AI detectors and stuff have been, to your, like, they're not great. They're not great at actually detecting just AI used. It detects other things, and it's a lot of false positives. I know that also our content filter, so that's another way that we generally try and enforce a lot of our acceptable use policy. A lot of those vendors are working on tools to kind of add into that platform to be able to do some monitoring around student use of AI that would give us some details. If there was, a concern from a teacher that a student was using AI, we could pull up and see, at the very least through their district devices, had they utilized any AI sources that that we could cite for them, and potentially dig a little deeper even into like what kind of questions did they ask the AI and stuff. But again, as quick as AI is evolving, they're trying to keep up with those tools and developing those tools as well.
The last article I read says that AI, the current generation of AIs score quite well on college exams and things.
And the bar, and, yep.
So I had a specific question around, you're going to form a working group, and is there any patent, or not patent, copyright, like if our curriculum and our lesson plans that in books and stuff, that if the teachers use AI with that, is there a general copyright issue? Maybe that's a question for Justin.
I just want to make sure I understand the question, Dr. Sheldon. So is there a copyright issue raised if that becomes like an AI input?
What I'm thinking of, a specific example might be, there's a chapter, science class, and the teacher wants to use AI to summarize key points in the chapter text, and so you upload the text from the textbook, and would that be a patent violation?
It is probably not going to be a copyright issue if it's being used directly for an educational purpose.
Okay.
And we're notifying the students that they cannot then turn around and potentially do the same thing. I don't know what way they would be doing that in, but so there are certain exceptions to just kind of the blanket prohibition against the copyright, and that would be one of them.
Okay, thank you.
I think we also have to be careful with copyright is understanding the percentage of the document. So like one chapter out of a large book is different than uploading the entire book. So I think that's also like, I know that that's a struggle for me as a teacher. How much can I allow my students to have a PDF of? And it seems to be a forever confusing process for me to figure out what is allowed in copyright, how many chapters, how many pages can I create a copy for my students?
This feels like it's kind of right at the heart. I'm looking over at our district goals, right? Preparing contemporary citizens. And I know we've talked about different assessment measures. And if the goal is to have students have a comprehension, have a mastery of some skills, like AI could facilitate that, but we're going to have to find other ways to check in with students and see what they've really learned, how they can apply the concepts and things. So it is a very relevant and timely challenge. One group of students that I was interested in, it talks about how AI may not be incorporated for things like recording classroom instructions or things like that. With special education, should we make, I know there's in here about authorization being granted, but would there be AI uses that are especially beneficial to a student that might have a particular IEP that we should note as a policy that, some of the restrictions maybe don't apply to them if it's part of their curriculum?
Sort of increasing accessibility or using it along with a sort of accessibility related software.
Right.
I don't know, Justin, is there anything that would prohibit us from doing that?
No, and to the earlier point, I think the term that was used earlier with guardrails, I think is completely appropriate. And we did also reference, I believe the ADA, the IDEA kind of earlier within the document. So that was certainly a point of discussion that we had, that this will probably come up in that context sooner rather than later. So the goal was not to prohibit that student population from being able to use it, but generally speaking across the board, I think to start with the rule that it's not going to be permitted, and then kind of work backwards from there. That was an intention here, to not necessarily explicitly describe the carve-outs with the
Right.
exceptions, but knowing that they're certainly going to come. And I think this was actually one of the points that we talked about with revisiting it months later, is that there may be an adjustment.
Okay.
Once
Yeah,
we see how
'cause
frequently it comes up.
if there's students for whom it would be immediately beneficial, I wouldn't want access to it to be like put on a trial basis or, be part of this, let's slowly roll it out. If the ability for a student to record and get a transcription of classroom notes so that they can review it and absorb it in a different format later, like, that seems like a great tool and accessibility that shouldn't be part of a slower rollout across the district.
And what we're looking at here at this point in time are the administrative regulations. So a modification, if needed, can be made much faster than going through a complete policy review again.
And
Dr. Rushi, when it comes to additions to the ARs, I know we're not required to vote on those. However, do we have a practice of when those changes happen for us to be informed? So that would be informed in one of our action meetings, or it would be only informed in this meeting?
They would be, first, the board would be notified in the weekly communication that is sent to the board. It would also appear like as an information item on this particular agenda, and then depending on what it is, I mean, if it's something that only impacts the business office, that might be it, but other changes, if they impact a larger community, then that might be part of the superintendent's report at a board, at a board meeting, or part of a technology presentation, something, something like this.
Ms. Sachs, I have one other question for you. So thinking about, and you don't have to have an answer tonight, but I would love it, like, when this comes to the action meeting, to have a sense of, given that I know our students don't necessarily read our policies, and even if it ends up in a handbook, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're reading that and understanding that. So a sense of, like, what's the plan to help students be aware of this? If I missed the bullet, if it's already in the ARs, let me know, but I don't think it is. Just a sense of, like, how are we going to prepare students as they're going to be accountable for something they may not understand? That would be great.
Great. I don't have an exact answer, but it's funny because Mr. Anderson and I were just speaking about that this morning. And one of the vehicles that he's already been working with a teacher group to develop some ideas and find some resources and decide sort of where to start. And one of the thoughts they had, at least at the high school level, is there's a homeroom/advisory period that we can have some rollout of, this is what this is. They have to sign off on the acceptable use policy, and this is a change to the acceptable use policy sign off. So someone's going to have to review it with them. What we'd like to do is have some information, this is what it, I mean, they'll like roll their eyes at us, but this is what it is, this is sort of what this is saying, and we are not necessarily like opening the floodgates on September 1st for all students to have access to all AI sites. We're starting with the staff, and over the summer, as they start to get to know things, we're going to have a process for them to request opening the use of certain AI sites for students, and then we will and only at the high school level, and then we will take it from there as we sort of go more slowly through the process and see what other guardrails are needed. So yes, we can bring back sort of a plan. That sort of was our thinking so far, is having that as a start in a homeroom piece, and then as it applies to something you're learning, your teacher's helping you work through it. But we'll have more information at the next business meeting for you.
One just minor comment, since we dug into 815 AR1 to start with. The first line is the purpose, and it ends with regard to artificial intelligence. I would just putting the AI abbreviation there because AI is used throughout this document.
Got it.
And then there were another AR and then the policy itself. Oh, no, no, I'm sorry, no,
Just
just
that
the policy itself.
There's a
Yeah.
form
Um,
or two at the bottom.
In the policy itself, I saw the addition of the definition of authorized users, but then that phrase isn't often used. There's just users, in most places. I think at the end, I caught that there was one that had the authorized users in there, but
It's in the AI definition, or it's in the AI paragraph, authorized users.
right, but it's not, there's other places where users of the district website, network users, like users is used in other places, but not authorized users, so I didn't know if that was a meaningful distinction.
I think it might be.
I think the question, Rob, might be, if I'm correct,
Uh-huh.
is there a difference between user, authorized user?
In the
I think that
policy.
might, in the policy. If there is, then we leave it alone. If there isn't, then I think we
The-
need to be consistent.
Not to take your question from you, but to me there is, because we don't necessarily